Hello, this is Satish Reddy, Department of English, MBS Degree College, Mehboob Nagar. We all know the Indian social structure. Indian subcontinent, particularly India, is caste-ridden. It is fragmented. India is divided into thousands of castes, and it is known for its plurality, diversity, a huge diversity. And of course, we know that there is unity in diversity. But in spite of all these cultural, linguistic, caste-related, religious variations, but still people are, in a way, living together. When our freedom fighters, Indian freedom fighters, and those who are actively associated with the national movement and who fought against the British rule, and their aspirations were that India should live together, India should always be united, and it should never give place to any foreign forces. But it all depends on the unity of Indians. But what is the binding force? What is the uniting force? There is no one religion to bring us together. There is no one caste. In every aspect, there is plurality. In every respect, there is diversity. So it is not possible to keep us united. But there is one thing which can keep us united. That is the Constitution of India. It is the only constitution which has been keeping us together, keeping us united. And no other force that is helping us, together. But when we talk of constitution, there is only one person who comes into everybody's mind and who needs no introduction at all. And he is none other than, is a chief architect of the Indian Constitution and one of the makers of the modern Indian nation, Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, or B.R. Ambedkar, and who was born on April 14, 1891 in Mhow, now in Madhya Pradesh. Hailing from a community, considered untouchable by the Hindus, Dr. Ambedkar grew up experiencing the trauma of seclusion and discrimination, but remained undeterred. Encouraged by the Maharaja of Baroda, he went to Columbia University, New York, where he did, his master's thesis on the caste system and doctoral work on British finance in India. And he was a crusader, and he was a fighter, and he was a reformer, he was a philosopher, he was a social thinker, he was a financial thinker, he was a social philosopher. And throughout his life, he dedicated his entire life for the rights, for the betterment, for the upliftment of the underprivileged sections, downtrodden sections of this society, or in the rather Indian society, the Dalit Bahujans of this country. Here is a speech that was delivered by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. In fact, it is a closing speech in the Constituent Assembly on November 25th, 1949. The speech outlines, the diversity of India and the details the challenges that India would face in implementing the Constitution. In his capacity as the chairperson of the drafting committee, he was delivering that speech. In fact, it is one of the historic speeches of independent India. In this speech, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar stressed the need to build a nation on the basis of social equality. That is the only that was lacking in this country. And Dr. B.R. Ambedkar also unfolds a roadmap that India needs to follow in order to hold its fragments together and graduate from being a country to a full-fledged nation. The three important advices given by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in the course of his speech on 25th November 1949 were to give up the grammar of anarchy, to avoid the hero worship, and to work towards a social and not just a political democracy to continue to be relevant, even today. As I told, and this speech was a landmark speech in the history of independent India. As I told you, three things: to avoid grammar of anarchy and hero worship, and working hard towards social democracy. These three are important. The very essence of his speech, is that these three advices given by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Then, proceeding, then what would happen? On 26 January 1950, India will be an independent country. But what would happen? Will it be able to maintain its independence? Will it be able to maintain its independence, or will it lose it again? Or will she lose it again? And he said, this is the first thing that comes to my mind. It doesn't mean that it is not that, India was never an independent country. The point is that it lost its independence once it had. Will she lose it a second time? This is what comes to his mind. And that thought makes him most anxious for the future. And he said, what perturbs me greatly is the fact that the India has once, before lost her independence, and it lost her independence, not because of the foreign elements, not because of the external forces. It lost its independence by the infidelity and treachery of some of her own people. And will that history repeat itself? It is that thought which fills him with anxiety. Then of course that anxiety is deepened by the realization of the fact that in addition to our old enemies in the form of caste and creeds, as we referred to, as we touched upon, in the beginning, this Indian subcontinent, rather India, is full of, caste and creeds. And moreover, there are so many political parties with diverse and opposing political creeds. But the point is, will India or will Indian people or political parties place the country above their creed, or will they place creed above country? Which one comes first? But, this is certain that all political parties place creed above country. Our independence will be put in jeopardy if they put their creed above country. And definitely, the second time it will lose its independence. And this eventuality we must all resolutely guard against. This is what we need to fight against. And we must be determined to defend our independence with the last drop of our blood. And even on 26th of January 1950, India would be a democratic country, in the sense that India from that day would have a government of the people, by the people and for the people. The same thought comes to mind, comes to his mind. What would happen to democratic constitution? Will she be able to maintain it, or will she lose it again? In the beginning, he talked about independence. Now here he's talking about the democratic structure or democracy in India, because from 26 January 1950 onwards, India became a democratic country. And this is the second thought that comes to his mind and makes him anxious as the first. First, he talked about losing independence a second time, and here he's talking about democratic structure or democratic culture in this country. But, he said it is not that India didn't know anything about democracy, but once it was studied, once it was full of republics, whether there were monarchies or whether they were either elected or limited, but there was some sort of democratic culture. And at the same time, it is not that India didn't know anything about parliaments or parliamentary procedures. And he also quoted a Buddhist book, Bhikshu Sanghas, that disclosed there were only there were parliaments for the sanghas, but they're nothing but the parliament which we have in our modern times. But sanghas knew, and they also observed the rules and procedures of parliamentary system. And these rules and procedures were applied by the Buddha to the meetings of sanghas. So he says he must have borrowed them from the rules of political assemblies functioning in the country in his time. So he was referring to the, the olden days Buddha Sanghas. And the same democratic system that India lost. And what makes him more anxious is that, will it lose a second time? It is quite possible. And there is always a danger of democracy giving place to dictatorship. And at the same, it is also quite possible for this newborn, democracy to retain its form, but give place to dictatorship in fact. The danger of the second possibility becoming an actuality is much greater. So there is every possibility. And then what needs to be done? What should we do? If we wish to maintain democracy, just not merely in form, but in essence, but in fact, in practice, what are we expected to do? What is our duty? And the first thing in his judgment is that we must not lose our constitutional methods of achieving our social and economic objectives. And we should hold fast to constitutional methods. There is a constitution. It has given us provisions. It has given us all kinds of means to achieve our socio-economic objectives or goals. What he means that we must abandon the bloody methods of revolution. And we must also abandon the methods of civil disobedience, non-cooperation, and satyagraha. They are no longer required. Now we have a democratic constitution, and we have democratic constitutional methods. So there is no need for us to indulge in such bloody methods of revolution, civil disobedience, non-cooperation, satyagraha. And but finally he says, when there was no way left for constitutional methods, for achieving our economic and social objectives, of course, your means can be justified, and we can resort to unconstitutional methods. He just doesn't leave there. What he says, if there is no way left for constitutional methods for achieving our economic social goals or objectives, there was a great deal of justification for unconstitutional methods. And as long as you are able to achieve your goals and your objectives through constitutional methods, then there is no need for us to indulge in any kind of unconstitutional methods. But these constitutional methods are open. So when they are in place, when you have everything at your disposal, then your unconstitutional methods cannot be justified on any ground. This is nothing but, if you do so, and if you still indulge in unconstitutional methods, this is nothing but grammar of anarchy. And the sooner they are, given up, the better for us. And he talks about the second thing that we must do. And he recalls and he reminds us what Stuart Mill has given to all of us who are interested in the maintenance of democracy. Under no circumstances should we lay our liberties at the feet of even great men or great people or to trust him or her with power which, enables him to subvert our institutions. This is a very, very fundamental point to be remembered, to be kept in mind. Under no circumstances should we lay our liberties at the feet of even great people, great human beings. Of course, there is nothing wrong in being grateful to them, and they have rendered lifelong services to this country, and they did sacrifice, and they did make supreme sacrifices for this country. However great they are, but we must not lay our liberties at the feet of, those people. But remember, there are limits to our gratefulness. Yes, we should be grateful to them, and there is nothing wrong in being grateful to them. But there are certain limits to our gratefulness. And this caution is, far more important and necessary in the case of India than, in the case of any other country, because he knows the social, base of this Indian society. That's why, he cautioned us, he warned us not to lay our liberties. Because in India, bhakti, or what may be called the path of devotion or hero worship, plays an important role in politics. And that is unequaled in magnitude by the part it plays in politics of any other country in the world. And this bhakti, maybe in religion, a road to the salvation of the soul, but in politics, he warns very, very clearly. In politics, bhakti or hero worship is sure road, to degradation and eventual dictatorship. This is this second point is very, very important. Then coming to the third point, but we have got political democracy, and all citizens who are of 18 years age, they're entitled to cast their vote according to the constitution. And of course, but we must not be content with just mere political democracy. Our duty is to make our political democracy a social democracy as well. If there is no social democracy, political democracy can never survive. It cannot last unless there lies, at the base of it, social democracy. But before that, what is social democracy? What does it mean? He says very simply, it's a way of life that recognizes liberty, equality, and fraternity as the principles of life. This thing is very, very important. Social democracy means it's a way of life that recognizes liberty, equality, and fraternity as the principles of life. And these principles of equality, liberty and fraternity, they're not separate entities. They're not to be treated as separate items in a trinity. And they form a unity of trinity in the sense that they cannot be divorced from each other. One from the other, separating or divorcing them from one another is to defeat the very purpose of democracy. Liberty cannot be divorced from equality, and equality cannot be divorced from liberty, nor can liberty and equality be divorced from fraternity. So if there is no equality, that liberty would produce, the dictatorship or supremacy of the few over many. And equality without liberty, that could kill individual initiative. So these three are equally important, for the survival of social democracy. So the very, survival depends on these principles. Then, there is, he said that without equality, liberty, fraternity could not become, without fraternity, liberty, and equality could not become a natural course of things. So everything is equally important. All these, principles are equally important. And we must have enforcing agency too, that we must acknowledge that the fact that there is complete absence of two things in Indian society. Yes, it's our general understanding, our general, knowledge that two things are completely, absent in our Indian society. One of these, obviously, equality. There is no social equality, as well as economic equality. On the social plane, that Indian society is based on the principle of graded inequality. There is a hierarchy, the caste hierarchy, and some who have immense wealth as against many who live in abject poverty. So there is no social equality, there is no economic equality as well. But we have got political democracy, political equality. On 1950, we entered a life of contradictions. In politics, we have equality, but in social and economic life, absolute inequality. And it is recognized that one man, one vote, one value. But when it comes to social structures, economic life, we shall, by reason of our social and economic structure, and people are continued to be denied the principle of one man, one value, in social sphere. Can we afford to continue the same structure? How long shall we continue to live this life of contradictions? So as long as there is no social equality, political equality becomes meaningless. And you cannot deny equal rights, equal status, equal freedoms to all people, irrespective of their caste, creeds, beliefs, sentiments, and anything. This political democracy, will not survive. It will be in peril. It will be in danger. So our duty is to remove all these contradictions as soon, as early as possible. Otherwise, we'll continue, people will continue, people will suffer from inequality. And the majority of Indian society and those who are suffering from inequality one day will blow up the structure of political democracy, which this assembly, by which, he was referring to, that parliament has laboriously built up, painfully built up. So he was warning the parliament, and he was warning the Indian, well-meaning people, intellectual people, that let us strive for the social equality. And at the same time, there is, the thing that there is, the second thing is fraternity. What does that fraternity means? It's a sense of common brotherhood of all Indians. Do we really have that sense of common brotherhood? Indians of, of Indians, being one people. That this principle that gives, unity and solidarity to our social life. but it is absolutely lacking. But it is very difficult, very hard to achieve. Then he remembered how, the politically minded people, um, expressed their displeasure, their dissatisfaction at the use of the people of India. Rather, they preferred the Indian nation. So here, he tries to explain to us how the people of India was right, rather than the expression the Indian nation, because we have not yet transformed ourselves into a nation. And he says he was of the opinion that, in believing that we are a nation, we are cherishing a great delusion. It's nothing but a great delusion. How can we, people who are divided into thousands of castes, be a nation? And the sooner we realize that it is better, we are not, as yet a nation in the social and sense of the word, then we must realize the necessity of becoming a nation, and we should give a serious thought to it, and we should explore the means of realizing that goal. And the realization of this goal is going to be very difficult, obviously, because India is full of caste, this caste hierarchy, deeply embedded caste hierarchy in this country. And he says firmly, assertively, caste are anti-national, and that destroyed the social fabric of India. And they brought about the separation in social life. They divided the working class, and they are anti-nationals and national, because they generated a lot of jealousy and antipathy between caste. But we must overcome all these difficulties, and if you want to become a nation in reality, uh, for fraternity, there can be a fact, that only when there is a nation without fraternity, equality, liberty, will be no deeper than coats of paint. So he simply said, without eliminating and without wiping out the caste system in India, we cannot expect to have fraternity, the complete fraternity in this country. And you cannot, and he is also, targeting the upper class, or so-called upper caste people of this country. And he was directly telling them that the power in this country, particularly the political power, has been the monopoly of few, and the many, and majority of Indian people are ruled. The rulers are few, and the ruled are the majority people of this country, or in the modern term, can be used that Dalit Bahujans. And that monopoly of power not merely deprived them of their chance of betterment, and because of lack of political power, they could not better live, they could not strive for their own betterment, and it has completely sapped their, sapped them what can be called the significance, the very essence of life. And he says the underprivileged, the downtrodden caste classes are tired of being governed for centuries, for decades together. And now they are impatient to govern themselves. So this, urge for self-realization in the downtrodden classes must not be allowed to turn into, to become, devolve into a kind of class struggle or a class war. So it is the duty of this house to ensure that it is not, going to devolve into a class struggle or class war. Because in that case, it would be a disaster for the entire country itself. And here, he quotes Abraham Lincoln, a house, referring to the parliament where he was, the constituent assembly where he was speaking, where he was delivering his last speech. A house divided against itself cannot stand very long. So he advises them, the sooner room is made, the sooner the place is made for the realization of their aspiration, the better for the few, and the better for the country, and the better for the maintenance for its independence, and the better for the continuance of democratic structure. It is not only better for the maintenance of independence, but it is also better for the continuance of its democratic structure. Only then can we establish an egalitarian or equal society in all spheres of life. Then that is why, he laid, so much of emphasis or stress on that. Then he says, of course, we got independence. We are very happy. There is no doubt about it that. But let us not forget that, it has also brought upon, us, it has also thrown upon us the great responsibilities. And we got independence and we could draft our own constitution, but independence has thrown us, great responsibilities. And Britishers or foreign elements or foreign, external forces are no longer here to blame. And if anything goes wrong hereafter, it is we, who are to blame. We will have nobody to blame except ourselves. So, of course, at the same time, there is a great danger of things going wrong, and because times are fast changing and everything is changing, and new ideologies are coming up